Imagine you drive over a massive, incredibly complex suspension bridge every single day on your commute.
Right, just a totally routine part of your day.
Exactly. And to you, it feels indestructible. The steel cables are thick, the concrete is solid, and thousands of cars pass over it without a second thought. But then, overnight, someone quietly changes the fundamental laws of physics just for the specific type of metal used in the bridge's bolts.
Wow, okay, that is a terrifying visual.
Right, because the bridge looks exactly the same today, the traffic is still flowing. But the invisible rules holding its entire structure together they've suddenly shifted.
And applying weight to a joint that you don't even realize is fundamentally compromised is, well, it's a recipe for disaster.
It totally is. And that invisible ticking time bomb is exactly what we are looking at today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a structural failure hidden inside the digital infrastructure of global commerce.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one.
We are unpacking a highly specific briefing from Code Aura, written by Suyash Sumeru, all about an upcoming regulatory change in Brazil. Now, on the surface, this change sounds like, the most boring, minor bureaucratic update imaginable. You would completely scroll past it in a newsfeed.
You really would. It reads like a tiny piece of administrative trivia, like totally missable.
But we're going to explore why this tiny update is actually a massive system readiness issue. Basically, in July 2026, Brazil's Receita Federal is changing its national business identifier, the CNPJ.
Yeah.
They're moving it from a numbers-only format to an alphanumeric format.
Yeah.
That is literally it. They were just adding letters to a database field.
Which sounds so simple, right?
It does. But adding a few letters could literally bring global supply chains, invoicing workflows, and vendor onboarding to a grinding halt if enterprise IT teams aren't prepared. Okay, let's unpack this. Whether you work in enterprise tech, you manage international vendors, or you just, love learning about how incredibly fragile, complex digital systems really are, this is going to give you a fascinating new perspective on how our interconnected world actually operates.
It is, it's a phenomenal case study in how the size of a software change never dictates the scale of its impact. We build these massive multi-million-dollar global infrastructures on top of tiny, simple assumptions.
Yeah.
And those simple assumptions are actually the most dangerous because they're the ones we just stop checking.
Exactly. So let's start with the physical reality of the change. Because before we can talk about systems crashing, we really have to establish the anatomy of this new CNPJ.
Right. What's actually changing on paper?
Yeah. According to the Code Aura briefing, this rollout happens in July 2026. The crucial detail here is that the identifier is not changing its overall length. The current CNPJ is 14 digits long, and the new one remains exactly 14 positions long.
Which is incredibly deceptive from a data planning perspective.
So deceptive. Let's break those 14 positions down. The first 12 positions will now allow both letters and numbers. They become alphanumeric.
Okay.
The final 2 positions, which act as mathematical verification digits, those will remain strictly numeric. And here's the real kicker. Existing numeric CNPJs are not being converted.
Right. The old ones stay purely numeric forever.
It creates this dual format reality for all new business registrations moving forward. Think about updating the contacts in your phone. If a government announced that all new phone numbers would replace the first 3 digits with letters, but keep the exact same length,
Yeah.
you probably wouldn't think twice about it.
No, because the space is still the same length. It looks the same.
Right. But the moment you try to save a new contact and your digital dialer pad literally only has numbers 0 through 9 on the screen, you are stuck. The physical capacity to accept the new input simply doesn't exist in your interface.
What's fascinating here is that this dual format reality is essentially a trap for IT departments.
A trap? How so?
Because existing CNPJs aren't changing, right? So a company's software system might look completely healthy leading up to the deadline. They look at their dashboards, they run their daily automated health checks, they process thousands of transactions using the older, numeric-only CNPJs, and everything passes with flying colors.
Oh, I see. It completely lulls an organization into a false sense of security.
Exactly. They think they're compliant because they can store and display today's identifiers without throwing a single error.
But they're only testing their ability to handle the past, not the future.
Precisely. The system is operating beautifully right up until July 2026, when the very first alphanumeric ID hits the server.
Like a brand new supplier or something.
Yeah, a new supplier or a new legal entity tries to register to do business with you. The fundamental assumption that a CNPJ equals digits only is suddenly shattered, and the software has absolutely no idea how to handle the input. It's a failure triggered not by a hack or, server degradation, but by a perfectly valid new piece of data.
Okay, so this system physically can't accept the letter A in the first box. What actually happens to a company on a random Tuesday when that new alphanumeric CNPJ hits the server? Do alarms go off? Do servers literally melt down?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you almost wish the servers would melt down.
Wait, really? Why?
Because a catastrophic system crash, say, a server going offline and a website displaying a massive 404 error is actually easy to deal with. It's loud. The engineering team gets paged at 2 a.m., the incident response team spins up a war room, and everyone knows exactly what is broken.
Oh, right, because it's obvious.
Exactly. But what the code or briefing warns about here are silent failures. And silent failures are infinitely more dangerous and much harder to troubleshoot.
Wait, so the real danger here isn't a catastrophic headline-making crash, but more like 1,000 silent paper cuts across a company's daily workflow.
That is exactly it.
Explain a silent failure in this context. Like, how does a database silently fail to read a letter?
Let's look at how data validation actually works under the hood. For decades, enterprise software has treated the CNPJ as a pure integer. Because of that, developers wrote validation routines to protect their databases from bad data.
Okay.
Often they use something called a regular expression, or a regex for short.
Kind of like a digital filter.
Exactly like a filter. Imagine a piece of code written, 15 years ago. Its entire job is to look at the CNPJ field on a web form and sanitize it. The logic says this field should only be numbers. If a user accidentally types a dash, a space, or a letter, they probably made a typo. Just delete those extra characters before saving it.
Wait, so it actively alters the data without asking?
All the time. So a new, valid, alphanumeric CNPJ comes in. Instead of rejecting it and throwing a loud error code that a human being would notice, this old legacy filter just quietly strips out all the letters.
Oh, no.
Yeah, leaving only the remaining numbers, and then saves that now corrupted, truncated identifier. Then it pushes that bad data downstream to the billing system.
It's like an overzealous autocorrect that fixes a unique name by deleting half the letters and then officially registers you under that broken name.
And the system doesn't know it's failing. It successfully processed a record as far as it's concerned. But now, let's follow that corrupted data. Your web form hands it off to an API.
Right, and for anyone who doesn't live and breathe software architecture, think of an API as a digital messenger. It's the standard set of rules that allows two completely different software systems to talk to each other and pass data back and forth.
That's a perfect analogy. So the messenger picks up this payload of data to carry it to the financial system. But the API schema, the strict digital shipping manifest that tells the messenger what to expect, says, I am only allowed to accept integers for this field.
I see where this is going.
Right. The messenger looks at the letters in a valid, uncorrupted CNPJ, sees that it violates the integer rule, and simply rejects the payload. The invoice halts in its tracks. No alarm goes off on the main dashboard, but a supplier quietly doesn't get paid.
That is brutal. And the briefing notes, this doesn't just happen at the API level, right? It happens when data gets moved around in bulk.
Yes, during ETL jobs, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load.
Okay.
It's the behind-the-scenes process that takes massive amounts of data from one system, transforms it into a readable format, and loads it into another system, like a data warehouse used for corporate reporting.
So like the night shift workers moving boxes from the factory floor into the massive storage warehouse so the executives can count the inventory in the morning.
Right. And if the ETL job expects a 14-digit integer and encounters a letter, it might just drop those records entirely.
Just throw the box away.
Yep. Suddenly, a critical financial report quietly excludes a dozen new records. These are the paper cuts the briefing describes. They don't trigger a company-wide siren. They just create immense operational friction. Business teams notice their vendors aren't getting paid or the reports look slightly off, so they start creating manual, undocumented workarounds in Excel spreadsheets just to keep their processes moving.
Which pollutes the data quality even further. I mean, it is like a virus spreading through the company's nervous system. By the time you realize you have a problem, the corrupted data is everywhere.
And that leads to a massive, expensive cleanup effort that could have been completely avoided.
So we've established that a system quietly stripping letters or rejecting payloads causes these insidious paper cuts. The next logical question for an IT director is, where are all these regex filters and API rules hiding?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. This is what the briefing calls the great enterprise scavenger hunt. Because the CNPJ isn't just a single box on a single intake form. The data mutates. It travels all over the enterprise.
It is ubiquitous.
The Codor brief notes that this identifier lives in ERPs, which are enterprise resource planning systems. For context, an ERP is essentially the central nervous system of a company. It handles the actual money, the supply chain, the inventory.
Huge systems.
Yeah, and the CNPJ also lives in CRMs, customer relationship management tools, where sales teams track client profiles. It's in procurement systems, tax workflows, business intelligence dashboards, mainframes, and payment files.
And the complexity multiplies because these systems are completely interdependent. The briefing points out that your modern CRM might be totally up to date. It accepts the new alphanumeric CNPJ perfectly, but then it hands that data off to an older procurement system, and the procurement system rejects it.
It's insane. Think about trying to find every single time you wrote down a specific friend's name across the last 20 years of your life. You have to search your diaries, sticky notes, text messages, emails, and tax returns. But here is the massive cash surge. The diaries are written in a language that no one currently in your family speaks anymore.
That dead language is legacy code. The original developers who wrote the validation rules in 2005 or 2012 have retired or left the company. The logic is buried inside undocumented scripts, stored procedures, or batch jobs that nobody at the company currently understands.
And Codor points out a terrifying statistic on their blog. Roughly 40% of legacy systems lack documentation entirely.
It's wild.
That's not just a technical problem, that is a massive business risk. When 40% of your operational logic is a black box, you can't just go in and blindly change things.
You absolutely cannot. You mentioned earlier that the last two digits of the CNPJ are mathematical verification digits. Those are called checksums.
Oh, well, let's pause on that because checksums are a huge part of why this breaks. How does a checksum actually work?
It's a mathematical formula used to verify data integrity. The system takes the first 12 digits, applies a specific weight to each one, multiplying them by certain numbers, adding them all up, and dividing them to ensure the final two digits match the result.
Okay.
It's a brilliant way to instantly know if someone made a typo when entering their ID.
Because if the math doesn't result in those exact two final numbers, the ID is fake or typed incorrectly.
Yes, but here's the problem. You cannot multiply the letter B by 5 in a standard integer equation. It breaks the math.
Of course.
So if a developer goes into the code and forcefully changes a database column from a number type to a text string type just to make the intake form work, they might completely break the downstream checksum logic that relies on pure integers to do its math.
So a simple search and replace approach is a guaranteed recipe for failure. You can't just CTRL-F for CNPJ and change the data type.
Especially because it's rarely labeled CNPJ in the code. Sometimes the variable is named tax ID, sometimes it's national registration, sometimes it's just, an obscure acronym known only to the developer who wrote it 2 decades ago.
Man, if touching the code breaks the checksums, and you can't even reliably search for the variable names, how do IT teams even begin to fix this before July 2026? Codor lays out a playbook, and they make it very clear that the first question for IT leaders is not, how do we rewrite everything?
No, and it feels incredibly backwards to a lot of action-oriented IT teams. When a deadline is looming, the instinct is to start coding immediately, right? Let's patch the forms, let's update the databases. But Codor argues that the most urgent technical priority right now is doing absolutely nothing to the code.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Codor recommends starting with the CNPJ discovery assessment well before the deadline. You don't code, you map. They outline a 4-phase workstream to prepare, and the first phase is simply discovery.
Discovery is finding the CNPJ in the code, the databases, and the APIs. You use automated scanning tools and manual code audits to trace the flow of data. You look for patterns, not just variable names. You find the regex filters, you find the API schemas, and you build a comprehensive map of where this data travels. You cannot fix what you have not found.
So that gets you a massive list of vulnerabilities. What's next?
This raises an important question regarding the second workstream, which is analysis. Once you have a massive lack of everywhere the CNPJ exists, you have to prioritize. No enterprise has the time or resources to fix thousands of code instances simultaneously. You have to triage.
Walk me through a realistic triage scenario. How do you decide what lives and what dies?
You look at the business impact. Let's say your discovery tool flags 2 instances of legacy code that will break when letters are introduced. The first is a script that validates new supplier onboarding applications on your public website. The second is an internal, low-volume archiving script that generates a quarterly report for the archiving team to store old records.
Okay, the stakes are very different there.
Night and day. If that supplier onboarding workflow breaks in July 2026, You literally cannot do business in Brazil. New vendors cannot get paid, supplies stop arriving, revenue is actively blocked. That is a critical priority. It gets fixed first.
Makes total sense.
But if the internal archiving report excludes a few records for a month while you patch it, the business survives. The analysis phase ensures that engineering teams don't waste precious time fixing internal low-risk references that don't impact the bottom line until the critical paths are secure.
It's about stopping the bleeding on the main arteries first. Only after you map the terrain and prioritize the targets do you move to the third workstream.
Yes, the code changes phase. This is when you finally go in and update the numeric-only validations. You revise the API schemas so they accept text strings instead of just integers. You rewrite the checksum logic to handle the new alphanumeric combinations, and you fix the web input masks.
But the briefing notes a fourth workstream, which seems specifically reserved for the hardest problems: custom support.
Yeah. Custom support is necessary because of the deep, dark corners of the enterprise, specifically heavily customized ERP systems and legacy mainframes.
Why are mainframes so much harder to update than a modern web app?
Well, mainframes were built in an era where memory and storage were incredibly expensive. Developers didn't just casually assign a text field for a 14-character ID. To save space, they defined a 14-digit number as a highly compressed numeric format.
Like a zip file for numbers.
Sort of, yeah. They used formats like packed decimals, where two numbers share a single byte of memory. Changing a packed decimal to a standard alphanumeric text string doesn't just mean changing a rule, it means changing the actual physical memory allocation of the database.
Oh, wow.
It can require restructuring millions of existing records. Those environments demand highly specialized intervention because they are so deeply woven into the specific physical operations of that unique company.
Which is exactly why Suyash Sumaru and Code Aura are telling companies not to wait for the July 2026 rollout date to see if their systems can handle letters. The timeline is known. The new identifier format is public. The only unknown variable is the company's own internal system readiness. You need the time now to map the terrain before you start digging, especially if you have to rebuild memory allocations in a mainframe.
The runway is getting shorter every day, and the sheer volume of discovery required means this is not a project you can start in May of 2026.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and distill the main takeaway. The Alphanumeric CNPJ rollout in Brazil is not just a last-mile tax update. It is a massive, enterprise-wide system readiness and data dependency initiative. The absolute key to surviving it without operational chaos is visibility. It's about early discovery. You have to find the hidden dependencies in your legacy code and your downstream workflows before those dependencies find you in production.
It demands a fundamental shift in mindset from IT leadership. It requires acknowledging that the data models we built our global businesses on a decade ago might not reflect the reality of tomorrow.
And that is the ultimate lesson here. Whether you are a chief technology officer debugging a legacy mainframe, or just someone managing your own personal productivity workflows and spreadsheets, assuming that the fundamental rules of your data will never change is the biggest vulnerability of all. We build these systems expecting the world to remain static. We assume a phone number will always be 10 digits. We assume a business ID will always be numbers. But the world is relentlessly dynamic.
And we are seeing that dynamic shift happen more and more frequently as global systems scale up to meet unprecedented demand.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to ponder on your own. Brazil is adding letters to the first 12 positions of their CNPJ for a very specific reason. They need to vastly expand the mathematical possibilities of new business registrations. The country is growing. Commerce is expanding. They were simply running out of pure numbers to assign to new companies.
It's a problem born of growth and success.
Exactly. So as global commerce continues to explode and interconnected economies scale up, what happens when other countries inevitably exhaust their own numeric identifier limits? Think about social security numbers in the United States, global tax IDs in Europe, or international shipping codes. Are all of our global, highly interconnected enterprise databases currently built on the incredibly fragile assumption that human identities and business identities will forever be represented purely by numbers?
It really makes you wonder how many other invisible assumptions are hard-coded into the digital systems that run our daily lives, just waiting for a regulatory body to change a single rule.
It brings us right back to that suspension bridge we talked about at the beginning. The bridge looks perfectly fine today. The traffic is flowing smoothly, the dashboards are green, the APIs are passing data. But underneath the surface, the rules of the metal are changing. The bolts are under a new kind of stress. So the question isn't whether the bridge looks good right now. The question is, have you checked your foundation lately?
Such a great point.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope this gave you a powerful new perspective on the hidden mechanics of enterprise tech and the fragility of the systems we take for granted. Keep questioning the assumptions in your own systems, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.